Or fifth.
Right. All right. So thanks for putting together this agenda. I was a little bit surprised that I feel like we've been over a lot of these policies lately, but
Well, but this is the
Do-
spring update.
it is. Okay.
And so as Paulette's racing through the spring update, doing the side-by-side comparisons, which is why it took a little longer. We're
Okay.
trying to figure out what did they change this time? And there's, thank goodness, like the first few aren't that bad. 'Cause
Yeah,
we
there's
just,
some
we
more
just
changes.
looked at them.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's the whole side-by-side that takes time, and sometimes the technology is cooperative and sometimes it's a little tricky.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, this,
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like they're two very significant changes, so that's.
No, it's very minimal this time.
Let's start with AC, I guess. Non-discrimination.
Mhm.
So this one's quite minimal, except for the consequences remedies section.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
my main question about that one was, you know what, actually, I'm sorry, my question was answered. I forgot. At first, I thought it was only referring to employees, but then down below it refers to employees and students.
Yep.
But, but does it require, yeah, it still says no, see, it says any employee. So are students required to report? I guess that's what I'm curious about.
So employees are mandated reporters, which is why this is in policy and it's encoded and there's consequences for them, which is what's been put in here. Students who see something could say something to an adult, but really it's
Yeah.
incumbent upon the adults to do the reporting.
Okay. And is that true if a student tells an adult that they've witnessed something?
Yes.
It's not just for the person who
Right.
it's happened to. Okay.
Right, yep.
I had a question on line 53.
Yep.
It's the definition of harassment.
Mm-hmm.
It says harassment generally refers to the use of words or engaging in the behaviors. I understood a lot, and then they say that annoy, threaten, intimidate, or demean. And I just thought, I understand threaten, intimidate, or demean, but annoy is such a low threshold. I mean, I get annoyed by a lot of things.
And I think that's why, because that's straight from NHSBA, but I think that's why it says generally refers to, because yes, you can be annoyed by a fly buzzing around your head. You could be annoyed by somebody's loud chewing. You could there's a lot of things, but I think that that's where when the adult is aware of it, it's like, okay, yes, it's annoying that, they're clicking their pen, but
I guess I wondered,
Not-
do we really need that word in there? Because the other words are very strong and clear, and I just put that word in there. And for me, I feel like then anyone could say he's harassing me or she's harassing me or they are harassing me. And because they annoyed me. And then technically they would have a legitimate I don't
well, the link here is about linking it now to policy JICK, which is the bullying policy, which
okay.
I think you'd want to leave annoy there just because it's linked to bullying. And that if if a student does something to another student that they know they don't like, and the student says, I don't like that, you need to stop doing that. Now crosses the threshold to, you're now doing this specifically because I said,
Right.
I don't like that. And so I think that having that in there allows the adults who are dealing with this to think about, okay, is this bullying? Because we get into a lot of conversations with the bullying about, well, is it repeated enough? And it's sort of that there's a line, and this is preventing it from being gray about whether or not the behavior
Counts as bullying.
rises the
Okay,
threshold.
I can understand that kind of situation because when I first read this, I thought, seriously?
I wonder if it should be like intentionally in the ways or
Oh, intention.
knowingly or something.
Well, it
like
says
that.
without a legitimate purpose.
Well, that's true. Okay.
And we've had trouble with other policies with putting intent into the
Sure.
language of
Okay.
how are we measuring intent?
Right. No, and I think your point, Patty, is that the adults in the room are going to assess this.
Okay.
they're not just gonna accept. okay,
Right.
That person.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
Because I could do this to you while you're reading. You know.
You're harassing.
If you're trying to pay attention in class and I'm doing that, then that is kind of harassment at some point.
True.
Right, but if it could be just kind of be funny, it could be,
Well, that's why the intent doesn't matter. But it's true, especially, I don't know.
well, and then if I asked you to stop and you kept doing it, asked you to stop and you kept doing it, then it goes beyond. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, thank you for that explanation. The other one that I didn't understand. No, it's not this policy. Okay, that's it.
Okay, and I have one question, which I think I know the answer to, but I need to ask anyway. At this point, we are having to strike anti-discrimination language that refers to sexual orientation and gender identity because of executive order, or why are we striking that?
What lines are you looking at?
Well, I think I noticed it in this one on line 233. I think what I'm wrestling with is, do we have, like, are they setting a bar that's like, we're not allowed to protect this? Or is it that we could if we wanted to? But I'm not
I
sure
imagine they're
about.
taking this out of the NHSBA policy.
Well, no, that I
And
know. They are
Yeah.
doing that across the board because they're trying to create boilerplate language that the majority of their membership
Right.
will, you know, reasonably feel comfortable with.
Well, this is what's in policy ACF, and this is the USDA regulations, is to have the wording this way.
Okay.
And just a note on line 233 marital.
That's
spelling.
spelled creatively.
Well,
Do we have, I guess I'm wondering, do we
really
have to?
striking it, but I also see that it says copied from policy ACF, so.
Well, let me look what is in ACF.
And I also wondered about,
Well, ACF, the way we currently have it, just checking to make sure, yeah, leaves that parenthetical, including gender identity and sexual orientation. So I suppose you could leave that in there
I would,
because then it mirrors ACF.
AC, let me just go on New Hampshire School Board. Is that on the spring update for video?
No, it's not. That's what I was just looking.
yeah. And while you're checking that, my other question was 240, if we can keep the language that says we may provide materials in other languages. It's
Yeah.
not saying we're obligated to, but that we
Exactly.
can.
I don't see why we want to keep that.
Like in other sections, I understand that's USDA, but like we reference like those other protections in other sections.
Um. One other question I had is that the title of non-discrimination officer. I can't
Mhm.
remember where we landed on that before about. Do we just include that as one of your titles? So we didn't.
What is the many
I
things?
know, you have about 18 titles, but, okay, I couldn't remember if we changed it specifically to assistant superintendent or if we.
No, it's got to stay as non-discrimination officer.
So we have.
Slash Title IX coordinator. That's why, yes.
Okay,
Chief cook and bottle washer. I mean, yes, all of the things.
Okay.
So according to New Hampshire School Board Association, that USDA non-discrimination statement matches the red that was added to this policy. And sends you the blurb.
The USDA statement.
Yep.
Yeah, we have.
Which says copy from
I
ACF.
just sent it.
Wait,
to
in
you guys.
ACF or in the?
ACF, because it says it's copied from ACF, so
Right.
in the New Hampshire School Board Association one.
Mhm. So our ACF is out of date.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Does that also go for the language piece?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's what she said.
Yeah, I just sent you the paragraph.
But as you pointed out, our policy ACF doesn't have it yet, so. Whose policy are we copying from? I think we would have to update ours if we were gonna take that out.
It's just interesting, and I mean, I know like not everything is going to be consistent because some of this is state, some of it's federal, and it's coming from a lot of sources. But like the section 2 above it, you know, says that we don't discriminate on those things. Like section I says we don't discriminate. I mean, if this is specific to the USDA, I guess.
I think it's a difference
We move
between
on.
state and federal.
But
But
it's just-
the part on line 240 is not in New Hampshire School Board ACF. You could leave that line about 240.
Because don't we want to have information available to people who can, you know, understand it?
You think,
Peter,
if
Huh?
he's got one,
do you
yeah.
mind if he comes in and does it?
Please do it.
Okay.
We're gonna freeze. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. that
I
it's-
brought my sweater today because I was cold last time with the AC. And I was like,
So I think you can restore line 240, but I would
okay,
leave 233 out.
all right.
Okay.
Then I would, if no one objects, I would like to put back 240 because I think
Yes, I like that.
we kind of do that too.
So,
Okay, sorry, I missed it. I was,
That's okay.
well, I want to go back anyway and restate it here. So we're gonna keep it in 218 or
Mhm.
217, 218,
Mhm.
because that is what kind of employer we are.
Yeah, and that's
Whereas
right.
in number 3 here, 233, this is just a copy of the USDA statement.
Correct.
Mhm.
So we're gonna take that one out. I mean, we're gonna leave it struck
Mhm.
as it is.
Yeah.
But you're gonna return
in the-
line 240,
Correct.
Right.
so that red line will come back in.
But then are we going to add ACF to our next
Would,
agenda, or are we just gonna leave it as it is?
we could add it.
Or we could change this to say copied from New Hampshire School Board Association policy ACF to make it more precise.
we can bring ACF.
I want to, but-
Well, but see what's
I
odd
don't want
about,
to, but they should
They
match
should
if we're
match,
referencing
yeah.
it.
yeah. Yeah, we should bring ACF unless it's a decision now to just make that change in ACF. Instead of having to bring it into this meeting,
It's true.
and then we could make that change and just,
I feel better looking at it though, bringing it to the board.
okay. Because the adjustment for NHSBA and ACF was made February 27th of 2025. Our policy was approved March 25th of 2025.
It sounds right.
So
Oops.
we missed it.
What? Or just leave it?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, well. I mean, I guess we can leave it since we've just approved it, but
Mhm.
But practically speaking, we're not
Good
really gonna
policy.
follow the USDA policy this way. Because we have several other sections of this policy that say that we will protect.
okay,
based
so
on
maybe
these
we just leave
categories.
it, and not, we don't make a big deal out of it. Is that what you're saying?
Not about it, well, you don't need it there to do it anyway.
Yeah,
But Patty would, just thinking of audits for
Mhm.
food service,
Mhm.
that would be tied financially, right? would it have to,
Well, I'm just looking because in policy ACF, it talks about the superintendent shall ensure that all materials and resources used to inform the public about USDA supported food service program include the non-discrimination statement in its exact wording.
Okay. All right.
So we're gonna have to
Already
have
got it
the
all.
exact wording in order to continue to receive the benefits of the food service program.
Okay, but so the obligation of USDA is that we use their language verbatim, not that we let them dictate our practices.
Right.
Well, no, because we look in 3 other places in this policy that we are
Oh, yeah,
protecting
right,
based
right.
on those.
Right, but if we're
categories.
saying this is their statement,
Then
we
we-
really need
we
to
need-
represent their statement.
So that's-
We can't change their
Okay.
statement.
So I think that makes sense.
Okay. So we're keeping it as is. Number 3,
Mm-hmm.
229 through 265.
No, we're
No,
taking out-
to 238.
We're taking 240 back.
We're putting 240 back in.
keeping it with the red strikes?
Mhm.
Okay, do you want policy ACF? I can have Karen bring it down.
Right now?
So is that what you're saying?
No,
I
next
don't
time,
think we-
Okay, all right.
next time.
Okay.
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 Can I ask a question just at the very beginning? This is one, I just don't understand this. The definition for discrimination, but discrimination is conferring, line 42. Discrimination is conferring benefits upon, refusing or denying benefits to, or providing differential treatment to a person or class. What does that mean?
It means you treat them differently, basically, whether
Right.
it's giving them benefits or denying them benefits.
Right, because you could have like another way of using discrimination or like you have discriminating taste, you will only eat dark chocolate that's at a certain percent, like, so you're saying this is more beneficial.
It's like an opting in versus an opting out.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
ACA, back again.
It's like there's so much overlap in all of these too. It's like.
Well, AC is the one that is Title IX. ACA is the corresponding one when the behavior does not rise to the level of
Right, okay, yes, I remember that from last time we did them not too long ago.
this.
Thanks.
I had one question on this, Patty, just going at lines like 69, like that paragraph.
Yes,
And just operationally, is that pretty normal for people to report same day? I just wanted to make sure we weren't like implementing some.
but I'm also glad that this line 70 through, actually 71 through 72,
Uh-huh.
because this is when everything happens.
Yep.
As the students are getting on the bus, oh, by the way, Jack did XYZ today, and you're kind of going, and you're leaving, and I can't do any kind of an investigation. Okay, thanks. And it's generally Friday afternoon when you're leaving,
Yep.
before vacation.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's true. So I'm glad that they've got that in there. And then talking about what the volunteers are required to do. Now, the volunteers here. You've got to make sure that the volunteers are aware of this, but the volunteers, and I'm making an assumption here, the difference between somebody coming to do a field trip for one day compared to the designated volunteers that needed to go through the background check and those kinds of things.
So in this case, you mean the designated
Should we call it
volunteer.
the designated volunteer?
I don't know that that's what they're talking about.
Hmm.
We do go through things with volunteers when they're in the buildings.
Like non-designated volunteers, you mean?
Right.
Okay, so maybe we should just leave it.
I would leave it, but we've got to make sure that they're aware and that if
Right.
anytime where we've got somebody in the building, obviously they're going to be with a staff member, but if they see something that they're aware that they need to say something.
Should we add that here somehow that education has to take place? Maybe a heavy lift, but at the same time, if we're expecting that of them.
I think it's a matter of our onboarding, when we have them come into the building.
Yeah.
And from my understanding and my knowledge, I know principals go through these kinds of things with volunteers. They tell teachers, and teachers are pretty good about not leaving them alone.
Okay.
Students.
Yeah, that's true. We have that in policy as well.
That's the reporting piece. And there's additional changes in the 200s. Line 215 to 216, just to keep this parallel with what happens with Title IX, I would advise against including anything additional for appeals. Because really, if there's an irregularity, you're going to have an appeal. If there's something new that you find out, obviously you want to have an appeal. Or if there's a conflict of interest, I can't think of another reason you would want to open up an appeal. And not having lines 215 and 216 will leave it parallel with the Title IX investigation, which will make it easier for all the administrators when they're going through this.
To just take out number 3.
That's my recommendation.
Fine.
I'm okay with it.
I mean, you have to say what that additional basis would be anyway.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have one. And then in what was number 4, where it says the investigator, is that an actual person or is that?
The investigator is
That's
like
investigating.
it's a role, it's a rotating role. So if something were to happen at the high school, for instance, in this situation, it might be an assistant principal, it might be the director of athletics. It's not a title that somebody owns,
Mhm.
but it's whoever is doing the actual
Yeah.
investigation and finding out about what happened.
Okay. Makes me feel like it shouldn't be capitalized.
I think because it's a process. They capitalize complainant, they capitalize respondent.
Okay.
On line 230, ED 204 is basically the school board procedures for going through hearings and investigations and things like that. Yep.
Okay.
I was also glad to see the time frame in 236 kind of removed and moved down so that it's more about the appeal instead of the decision. There was a lot of these investigations, especially the Title IX. I think it was trying too hard to follow Title IX and there's X amount of days to do this and then X amount of days to do that. Makes it very hard. Times if you think about vacations and snow days. I've been involved in a lot of things where you've got to ask for extensions because of any and all of those reasons. People who are absent, people who are away on vacation. It's just really hard. And so moving that to the appeal just seems
Makes more sense.
sensible. Yeah.
Great. All right, anything else on this? Or questions about? So why don't we go reference this on that one?
Well, we went over this one last January.
Yeah.
Just updated.
Right, crisis prevention, so it feels recent, but. There goes.
Line 10, I just wondered if we should write EOP in parentheses after emergency operation plan, because then they keep using it afterwards.
It's on line 14.
It's on line 14. Oh, okay. Got it there.
I think that makes sense just because 10 is a type with kind of a heading.
Okay.
The EOPs are things that I take care of every year in the fall. They pretty much come out from the state with, so the New Hampshire Department of Homeland Security creates the template for the emergency operations plan. I then will take that template, compare it to what was done the previous year, and highlight for principals where there are areas to change. The principals then make the updates. A lot of times the updates are things like who might be on the response teams if they've had people hired in, different things like that. Then when they go to, each school has to then upload the EOP to the portal. I work with Ken Lynchy to pull the questions from the portal because they ask questions about, have you had upgrades to this and this system? Like principals wouldn't know. So what Ken does is for each building, he will provide the answers to those questions. I give the principals their answers so that they can fill out the questions in the portal and upload their plan to the portal. The plan also has to be signed off on by the chief of police, the fire captain, or the fire chief, and Zach before it's uploaded. So on line 32, I don't know what the date would be to recommend here. Because generally, and I'm surprised that they're putting this in writing on line 38, the EOPs need to be uploaded by the middle of October 15th. And really, the superintendent doesn't review, it's, I would say superintendent or designee,
Okay.
and maybe by October 10th. Because sometimes it is that tight a window to turn this around to, especially what's hard is getting the signatures from the chiefs.
Do you have to have a date by? Do you have to have a by?
Maybe not,
I think there's a federal reporting requirement.
but not for the superintendent to review it. I
No.
think that's what Steve is
I
saying.
think if you
could
change
remove
it, there's some sort of mechanism for reporting those changes.
It goes back up into the portal
Right.
because it has to go to.
You want to
Homeland
make it
Security.
closer, like to the final deadline, like October 14th or something?
Unless to Steve's point, you don't put a date and you just to the superintendent or designate for review, period. Or prior to upload.
Right.
And it does say it'll be done annually.
And they do come after you. The Department of Homeland Security does send reminders. And then if you haven't done it, I've heard that this has happened to us, they do send emails about, hey, you didn't send yours, so.
Well, I guess my only concern is whether it would help you get the information from building principals more quickly or anything like that.
Well, it's not even that I need stuff from them because what I'll do is I'll provide them with the entire template and I go through and I highlight similar to what happens with policy. Go look for the yellow highlights. This is where you've got to put your changes in. They're really good about getting the stuff back.
Okay.
What I end up waiting on is having the chiefs sign off, their sign off sheet. So I will usually send, I used to have Lynn send those really early and like chase them down. Like, I need this, I haven't had this. That's where the lag comes in. Because as soon as we have that, I send those off to the principals with the answers from Kenny and they upload them.
Okay.
If you wanted to remove the due date on 32, I think that would be awesome.
It's,
So Lisa, do you think that the final upload date is enough?
I'm
in terms of
Fine
what we're
with that.
required to have.
I'm always a little bit nervous about when we have a deadline specified in the policy.
Yeah.
Then if we're saying it has to be done by October 15th, then it may be, like to your point, not a bad idea to say that we need it to go up the chain by October 10th or something. But I feel like, Pat, if you don't think it's necessary, I mean, it's not a bill I need to.
I don't think it's necessary
Okay.
because the portal is there. This all goes into the portal, which they don't even talk about the portal in here, which
And your hands will get slapped if you don't do it quickly enough anyway.
it's true. It's true. They will come, they come looking for it.
So maybe it's just before it's submitted, or I don't know how to phrase that, but, or just to the superintendent for review, period.
Mhm. Superintendent or designee, I would
Yes,
say.
okay.
That's, I like
But
that.
then it says if after such review, the plan remains unchanged.
It's not even possible because, and coming up to this year, so I know that this is last year's template was pretty much unchanged, except they said, make sure your teams are changed over and a couple other things that were, kind of yearly things that you would change anyway. This coming year's template, they were saying last year was going to be significantly different. So there's gonna be, I think there's gonna be a whole remodel, but every year they go and they change it. And if nothing else, they go and they change the color of the cover, or there's something that's
Perfect.
different, so that
Just to add a little.
it has to change.
Okay. So, should we also add in line 37, superintendent or designee?
Hmm.
Instead of slash principal?
Yes.
Right. Any other thoughts on this one?
Mhm.
We have EGE, Paula.
Maybe not.
What did you say? You're not? Okay.
So we can remove that reference.
We'll just end with restate on line 62. No.
Rather than restate the district communication plan.
But isn't EGE the district community? No, we have a communication plan.
Right, but it's not a policy.
So that's just, okay, so we're just removing the reference to EGE.
Mhm. All the fun things in the background that go on. Everyone. There's always the confetti in the hallway up there.
Okay, so. We have the NHSBA surveillance policy, and then we also have our video and audio surveillance policy later on. I'm not entirely clear on, is this one supposed to be replacing that one?
ECAF
Mm-hmm.
is, so if you look at the notes, on the revision notes, EEAA is being rescinded.
Oh, and that's the other, okay, yeah, so it is replaced.
Yep.
Which is funny, because we just reviewed that one. Okay. So we knew this was coming. And then it also says that we should have a hearing.
Well, what it said in the note
Like that one.
is if you're doing audio recording on the buses, there should be a public hearing.
But where are you doing that?
I don't know that we're recording audio. There's
I-
audio.
asking the first
I
one.
don't know how they ever do audio on buses. We had audio on our buses. I couldn't understand one word of whatever, anything
That's what
that
I
was said on the
too.
bus. It was, I don't know what the point of the audio on the bus was. So maybe what the driver said, you couldn't hear anything.
Well, I know on at least one bus, there was an audio recording. Recently. So I think we do, but it's not new. That's what I mean. So it seems like having a hearing on it seems kind of random.
Well, if you continue to read that note. Alternatively, and at the very least, NHSBA suggests that when a board is considering adoption of this wholly new version of the former ECAF, it clearly know on its publicly posted agenda that immediately prior to the first reading of the policy, the meeting will include a public hearing as required by RSA regarding audio recording on buses. The hearing would only consider ECAF and should be in addition to and separate from the public comment. The board could limit the hearing to a set time limit and use the same or different individual time limits.
Well,
Districts that already use or wish to use surveillance with audio more broadly should consult with their private counsel. Well, there you go.
where'd you see that?
But, B, note B,
Oh.
the very last sentence in bold.
Okay, I missed that. Nice bold one. Well, there we go. Then.
So then we could send this to legal to look at, and we can revisit this in July.
Oh. Is that? Oh, I thought that was just with regard to the hearing, but no. That's with regard to whether we're doing it or not.
Mhm.
Well, I guess it depends whether there's any other reason to move this one along. I mean, we did just do AA, right, so maybe we let that one stand for now until we have a chance to get legal. Yep, guys. Are you two okay with that?
Are we using audio in other places beyond buses?
Hmm?
Are we using audio in other places beyond buses right now?
Well, this is all with the recording, the new recording law. And so we've sort of suspended any kind of recordings.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting though that there might be some other option if we're already doing it, you know. Grandfathered in or something.
Because we've already got the video in the hallways.
But that's just visual, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Surveillance with audio recording without the consent of all parties is only specifically permitted on school buses.
In this policy.
Section C, number 2.
Maybe it's not an issue. It's just whether or not we have a hearing, I think, is the issue. I guess. A.
Yes. I was just gonna say, just don't forget, we brought up EEAA only because it was an outdated policy.
Mhm.
So it seems from a housekeeping standpoint, not to move forward with EEA, because once you bring it to the board, then later we're gonna end up retracting it and it just gets tacked onto that agenda.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna wait on this one for legal, I would say just sit tight on the
EEAA. Oh, I see.
because you're not,
We don't want to move that one forward.
no, because then we're gonna have to do cleanup
No, that
afterwards.
makes sense.
But the question I've
Put it
got,
together.
well, the question I've got about this though is our current standing EAAA
Mhm.
that's been around for 11 years already touches on the audio recording part.
Right, and I think our only concern was that we knew these, the RSA around this was being adjusted. So. Are you saying it's not actually that outdated after all?
No, it is, but I still think this needs to go to legal, but I'm wondering about the new, because it's the policy coding is new, but the audio part is not new.
Right.
Because we're not putting audio recordings in the hallways or
Right.
in the foyers or in front of the building. It's already on the buses and that there's a carve out for that in this policy anyway.
Well, I know there was some discussion of this with our teacher evaluations as well. And do we want to talk to legal about whether that's a carve out too?
Well, so in section B, it would require consent.
Like I know for the pilot of the evaluations, they sent parents, because I got one, like a thing where you had to sign off, like they
Oh.
notified you that your kid's teacher was gonna be part of the pilot,
Oh, wow.
where there would be,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they did if not everybody signed off. I guess that's a separate thing, but they did ask, like they told people and you had to opt in.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you like it?
So, but we couldn't somehow build that
And it
in.
in
So,
that way. There's good.
but that would be.
Notification.
No,
Yeah.
that's without notification.
I think it would be against the law.
Okay.
We have to notify. Okay, so we'll have legal look at this. And we'll sit
Okay.
tight on it.
Okay, and I think to Polly's point, maybe we should build up on really we need it through, right, until we're ready to do them.
Well, that's gonna need to be rescinded,
Right.
so, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Data retention. Records.
It's not that old.
There we go.
Well, definition,
Sorry, it's gonna make some noise.
bubbling.
Now I'm cold.
Just because the heater's here?
Yeah.
My favorite kind, they gave off like such nice.
Yeah.
warm heat.
What's been added here is pretty much just legal language. And then I know Paulette included EHB-R, which is not part of the policy manual, but if you remember we've adopted it and this is on file for us so that we, if we need to know how long do we keep something, we can consult this, but it's not part of the manual. Because it's not something a general person would want to know.
Hmm.
How long do you keep? Okay.
And my only question, this goes back to the video pilot for the teacher evaluations, is would that be covered by this? Because if students are in those evaluation files in some way,
Good question.
Good question.
because it's unrelated, but it is potentially a recording. Right, I think the intent of this was student records. But that would be data that does have kids in it that we might be keeping. And we could always update it later, I guess, after we do the pilot, but I guess that would be a
Maybe
concern
once you
for me.
settle on a direction, and then that would be something I'd probably ask legal about.
And I was gonna say, could you just get that answer? I mean, I know we don't have the format necessarily settled for the evaluations, but is that something you could ask them? When we asked about the other policy, just
This one too.
about whether there's anything we need to know about, holding recordings of students in a teacher, it would be an employee file, right?
Right, because it could be video, it could be audio. It might be, I mean, if there's a transcript, there could be text. I mean, I just don't want to create a problem down the line.
Right, yeah, so I guess, I don't know, it's a pretty vague sort of question, but I guess we should just know if there's anything that would
If
impact.
it's being used for evaluation,
You do hold it, right?
I would think actually maybe to protect students, you don't hold it. That you, because you've already done the written evaluation, so maybe then
Right.
that takes away the issue.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know how I don't know
I would
enough about
think
how the
so.
software works or the process.
I don't know.
You could be right.
No, I don't know. I'm just thinking that's what seemed the more correct procedure to me.
I can
Right.
add that as part of the inquiry.
I think
And
that
then
would be great
depending
just
on-
for us to understand that.
Because it's clearly not part of student records. It's clearly not related to federal funds, which is most
This
of the.
is almost
changes in
sounding
this.
like the body cam conversation.
It's
where
similar.
It's like they're in the background there, but that's not the focus of the
Right.
video.
It might be there. So, yeah, I think it's worth finding out.
I can tag that in.
It's only turned on for legal situations anyway.
Right.
And also just I would assume that since it's not part of the student record, that it's not subject to right to know. But is that true? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just would wonder if I don't want to create a situation where we're inadvertently
Creating records.
creating records.
So maybe that had the answer is that they are erased, but I don't know how, but these are done with the company.
I have no idea.
Well, and then that's the other piece is when they settle on a platform or company, what's that agreement look like?
And just like Epstein or whatever own it. I don't know.
Well, I can find out about that. I can find out about the other piece.
Okay,
But we're okay with the additions here, the legal language was added.
yeah,
I'm not enough of a lawyer to object to it.
So do we want to move this one through anyway, or do we want to wait for that legal input?
If we do first reading and there's like minor changes that have to reference the teacher evaluations, that doesn't seem like a big deal.
That's what I would say.
But and I can't imagine they're gonna wholesale rewrite the policy just because of that one question. It might be like a sentence that we need to add.
Right. And I think it has more to do with the evaluations even than the policy. You know, like maybe we learn something, we have to, some part of the procedure around the evaluation that we need to understand. Is this particular one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, no. This is again some addition of language to align with how the Department of Ed carries out McKinney-Vento requirements.
Mhm.
Okay. And so there's just some cleanup to language in here. Line 53. Line 60. Confidentiality. It's pretty minor there. We do have a homeless liaison with our social worker, so line 198, we do have that role. And then this pretty much falls under student services, anything to do with homeless and students experiencing homelessness.
And look, you protected homeless kids pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yep.
So it's funny because I thought, so we changed the title of this, but then we still have a lot of references to homeless students. Anyone have strong feelings about whether we change those or not? It's a lot of words to put in students experiencing homelessness every time.
What are we doing? Well, it says children, we probably should say students.
Is it easier just to go through and
In the title.
Well, we could also say unhoused.
I was just gonna suggest that change homeless to unhoused
But-
and
Aren't some of these though come directly from the DOE, like it's referencing places, so wouldn't it need to match?
Like where, for instance?
Like 11?
Oh, that one, yes, the term homeless. Oh, I see. It defines it there.
Right. I worry about the language changing and then people getting confused. Like, I agree with you, like we've changed how we talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to just change children to students as the title? Mission of students experiencing homelessness. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. Technically,
Well, I actually,
if you have an
that-
18-year-old in high school who's an adult, technically,
Yeah.
that's not.
Or you, I don't know. I mean, I don't.
that's funny because the way I looked at it is they weren't a student yet, which is why we call them children.
There.
But- But you're right, they could be over 18.
And there's not probably a perfect word for that, so I don't need to. I can go
Right.
with it.
Based on the-
I don't think it matters.
I was more concerned with the term homeless students.
Yeah. I agree with you, but I do feel like that the law itself is the homeless assistance act, and so I think that
parallel, you want it parallel.
Yeah, okay. I think you're right.
Okay. Oh, record time.
We talked about EDAA already.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I don't know if y'all saw my message, but Lee was not able to come to this meeting, but can come to the July 7th meeting. Okay, so we will plan to on the agenda then, hopefully.
Okay.
And move that along. Yes, they said we have something.
quick thing, so Zach, when we did our agenda planning meeting, I had asked him to take a special close look at that AI policy because I didn't want to create a situation where the first reading came to the board and then he had huge concerns about it.
Right.
He just emailed while we were sitting here and did have a number of questions and concerns about it.
Okay.
I feel like that's a broader conversation because I'd like to understand his thinking a bit better and also think about how I think in this room and with some other folks on the board, we've been talking for a while about a desire to have globally more consistency for kids in some of our policies. So I think there are some pieces where we might want to say we'd like it to be, say, school level or grade level or department level, but there's also a need with this to create the right flexibility for them to figure out what works. He felt like the sample policy was too prescriptive in a variety of ways. So, like, if I'd known a couple days ago, I might have like tried to address it now. But do you feel okay about pulling it off the board agenda and then potentially? I feel like we need to have Zach in the room because I don't know that we can get to a good agreement as a group about it without just having that conversation.
Right.
I don't know, Patty, if we got time on July 9th or if he could come
July 7th?
or what, I'm sorry, I can't even.
No, that's
speak
fine.
anymore.
No, it's
Um,
fine.
Or at the soonest opportunity, because I think what we want to avoid is a situation where he sets up a working group that goes off and works for, say, the whole school year, and then comes back to us with something that feels out of step with some of the key things that the board was interested in.
Well, what are
Right.
what are you queuing up, Paulette, for us for July 7th already? And that'll tell us if we're, because I know we need to discuss cell phone. That has to come back.
Yeah.
It does.
Yes, because we're supposed to be checking that at the end of the school year and.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
I thank you for giving me credit for going so far in advance. Update that is not on my radar yet. I know based on this conversation, we have the daily physical activities, the cell phone policy and ACF.
Yeah.
So I think my question for you guys would be like, I feel like if Zach could come and speak to it, are you okay with not having that be on the board agenda for first read?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I
think
totally
he's
agree
got
with you.
a lot of concerns, and I don't think it serves anyone for us to put it out there for first read. And then he's like, these are the 87 reasons you
Exactly.
should not pass this.
Yeah.
Because that just doesn't help us.
I agree.
But I also think if we had a conversation, we might be able to help him understand where we're coming from on some pieces, and then we can understand better from him where he's coming from. Because I do feel like we don't want to have it be like the, educator capacity committee situation where it felt like by the time they were done with all their work, they seemed surprised by the board interest in annual evaluations by the time they were done. And we would not have been surprised that that was an ask, but they were, so we just didn't have a good connection.
Yeah.
And I want to avoid that with this.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Mhm. I think
And I
because
think we'll be able to
ACF
fit
is a short, quick, that's not gonna take much. The homework or the physical activity discussion could be more time consuming. The cell phone policy conversation could take up time and then the AI, so.
Well, maybe we could do that one first.
Well,
Right,
another
right.
way to go with AI could be, I mean, we had from our meeting notes and the things that we added to that policy, like I think we were in agreement on why those things were added. So we could just say to Zach, if you're comfortable starting the working group, knowing that this is what the committee wanted addressed in the policy here. I don't know, maybe we.
Are we meeting this policy in August? No, right?
So it sounds like July 7th might be too busy for AI,
That's what it
but
sounds
that we
like.
do need to have a conversation with Zach before we move too much further.
I would love to at least get his initial input.
So I can forward you the email that I think he copied.
I think he sent it to
me, but not
everybody.
you too. Hang on, let me see.
I've got it.
Yeah, I did too, but it was in the middle of this meeting, so I
Yeah.
didn't. It looks like he didn't copy you too, so I'm gonna forward to you guys, so you
Yeah.
can see directly what he was asking.
I mean, I thought that our intention with that was to try to have something in place by the new school year too, so.
I agree, and I think.
But I don't want it to be something he doesn't feel good about either.
And I also think our intention with this policy and some other ones was we'd like for kids to have that consistency of maybe there's one
Yes.
practice in place for the whole elementary.
Mhm.
Or for like, if they decide it's K3 and then there's something else for 4 or 5 or whatever it is, but there's consistency. And I know he has a strong concern, rightly so, in making sure that we're not like hamstringing what teachers can do that actually is good for kids. So I'll just forward this to you guys because I'm sorry. I
And
didn't see
also,
that you didn't have it.
If it's likely that the working group is going to take a whole year, then I really think we need to have something in place before that. So I'm in favor of trying to fit it in.
Okay.
Can I just ask about the cell phone thing?
Sorry.
Are we?
In the policy,
It
we're
says we're
supposed to review it at the end of the first year, or
Mhm.
annually is what it says.
That makes sense.
And I know that there are some requests for us removing the language about personal devices because of the texting that's happening through the use of personal devices. There's the equity concerns that come up. Pretty much the secondary adults in that building at the high school are feeling very strongly about removing that language from that. I think that that's probably the only piece that needs to be revised, but
Yeah.
you're gonna look at the whole policy, you're gonna look at the whole policy. There was the EAF, ECF, EAF,
ECAF.
ECAF that we had from today.
Mhm.
So we've got that coming back.
Legal input.
And then we had,
Yeah.
the discussion on IMAH, which I think is enough for next time.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the crowdfunding thing, I had a preliminary conversation with Nathan. I mean, I think he agrees that it's not quite working as he envisioned. But I do feel like that's also one of those that it could be a longer conversation, and we'd probably not want to deal with that until we have a new BA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was one where I was desperately hoping to get that fixed before the school year started, but I don't want to make a bigger mess by trying to fix it without that input.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that one's probably.
And actually, we had talked about trying to have something from our homework working group done too. So yeah, we have a pretty full agenda.
Well, with homework, I feel like we got the input, but we were gonna wait till Chris Tebow was situated to necessarily update it so that he has a chance. Cause I mean, probably he has to deal with that more than anybody else in the district.
Okay.
So we want to have a draft to sort of show him to,
That's what I thought our plan was to have a
maybe
draft.
we're gonna try to do
Yeah.
that, but okay.
But if that's the case, it's not gonna take us much time. It's just sort of, I think it would just be us reporting on what we've come up with.
Mhm.
Rather than
Yeah,
really discussing it, and then we'll send it out for feedback again.
I think that makes sense.
So, okay, but yeah, if you, so you passed along Zach's.
I just forwarded it to you guys and he just answered me.
And maybe we'll just have to do
Yeah.
that in September.
I don't know. So I think what I was saying to him is that we have some things that we care about as a policy committee and a board that are reflected in the policy
Yeah.
to make sure that we're not like in two different silos with it.
Yeah.
And maybe we would give him some guidelines for what we'd like them to address.
Mhm.
All he said was that sounds like a reasonable approach, but I don't know that that means we've solved the whole thing and we probably still need to have a conversation.
Well, we may be able to revisit our draft policy and scale it back considerably if that would make them more comfortable, so that it does just express those things that.
Okay, so Paulette, the drop dead, if we want to keep that on the agenda in some form, is Friday. And
Thursday. We'll say
Thursday.
Thursday.
We'll say Thursday night.
We'll say Thursday. Thursday, like midday. Technically, our deadline's
No, I
Tuesday
know.
at
Sorry,
noon.
I know.
But it will say, if I knew by noon on Thursday, because I have to pull everything together.
And wait, you're talking about keeping it on the agenda for the board meeting?
I don't think we should.
No, I didn't mean that.
Okay.
I meant in our committee.
In our next committee meeting, look at it,
We can
pare it
look at
down,
it.
and then try to give it back to him as a
Right.
sample.
I don't know if we're gonna have time between the
I know.
conversation. That's why I'm thinking, I mean, do we need to meet in August? Do we need to meet in August? Do we have an August board meeting?
We do.
Late August, right?
Yeah.
Nope, second Tuesday.
Really?
So I'm wondering maybe that day.
Well, I'm not here on that day. But
I'm looking at my
more
calendar.
importantly, I just meant, I was thinking maybe we could do something to that policy without it involving a larger conversation with Zach that would take up more time. Like maybe we could come up with a new version to propose to him. that would be.
I wonder
But I
why,
agree.
I wonder what,
Full agenda
what the
already.
point of that would be if it's. Do we need one just to say we have one? Like that's,
I think we need one to have the board's interest in some of the consistency for kids communicated. Because we've had like a
And I
lot.
think consistency for teachers. I think
Uh-huh.
going into a new year where AI is like taking over the world with no parameters feels really.
so that's where the August 11th, even though I know Pip, you're not gonna be here, because that's a board meeting day, we have the opportunity maybe that day. Or is it the week after, as we get closer to school starting back? And again, I don't know what his plans are for being out either. But that's why I'm saying like August 11th, he'll be here for the board meeting.
And I do think too, like we might want to dust off as like a stopgap or plagiarism and like cheating policy to like just explicitly say to kids for the handbook that if you're using this without like the express, like, you know, whether it's your teacher has to know you're using it or you have to follow whatever guidelines. I mean, because there is this sort of, is it cheating? And kids are using it. Like
Right.
in all their classes every day at the high school right now.
Well, I'm okay with that if you want to plan meeting. I might be able to join remotely, but.
Oh, that would be,
On the 11th.
yeah, on the 11th, if we do something at. We say 9:30.
Me.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, 8:11, 9:30.
Okay, so that'll be AI, and I think that's not a bad idea to include the plagiarism. Whatever else.
Well, for that one, I just feel like it might be a minor language cleanup, but just to be explicit for the high school handbook, especially that using this without then I don't know what the language is, but I feel like if you are using it for class, your teacher should have know that you're doing it and that the use is something that's understood to be acceptable because they're using it to participate in class.
Right.
It's not even just writing papers, and that's like nuts. But I also worry about just taking away the Chromebooks in class because they do use them to take notes and they're using them for other legitimate things, which they should be allowed to do.
Mhm.
And then we'll also have the spring update to still do, and then the fall will be out.
All right.
Yep.
In that case, another meeting is not a bad thing.
Okay. All right, and I
All right.
forwarded you guys all of Zach's feedback on the AI policy so you can read it. I haven't really quite digested it all other than to see that it's quite a lot, so.
I sent you all an invite for the 11th at 9:30, so that's on your calendars.
Thank you.
Both my phone and calendar.
Okay.
All right. And so our next meeting is the 7th, we know that, right?
Yep.
And we said 9:30 for that one, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
It's your turn.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.